It's bracketology show, so beautifully named, Fielding the 68. That's right. Love that. We are, of course, presented by Bet Rivers, as always, on this wonderful YouTube channel. And I'm Jim Root, your host for today, and I'm joined by two of the best bracketologists you will find out there. Got Jonathon Warriner from Making the Madness and Rocco Miller from bracketeer.org. Fellas, I don't even want to beat around the bush. I'm going to start real hot with a question for you that, Rocco, it's actually based off a tweet that you gave out on Friday. You said you think this is a strong bubble, which I would say in my years of following bracketology, no one's ever said that. I think it's always the worst bubble ever, every single season. That's all we get. So I'm going to let you talk about quick why you think it is the best or a strong bubble, maybe not the best bubble ever, but a strong bubble. Then Jonathon, I want to hear if you agree. So Rocco, what do you got? Why is this such a strong bubble?
Well, Jim, even in most of those years, and I agree with your sentiment on the quote unquote weak bubble that we hear typically each year around this time as we start to head towards March. I really don't understand fully in those seasons where the notion comes from. But I do get it from a sense that you need to select 36 at-large teams, right? And when you're selecting 36, sometimes you may only have 32, 33 that really, are quote unquote deserving of inclusion. And then you have to find 3 or 4 that you're iffy about and you throw them in to fill out the first 4, fill out the board, and off you go. Well, this year it's completely the opposite of that. Jim, what I found last week was Friday and Monday, both the 2 main days where we do our updates, is I had about 4 or 5 teams on each of those days that I would have had no problem including. But again, it's the opposite problem. We only have 36 spots. We got to send 4 or 5 of those off to the NIT. And that still exists today. And then as we went through the week, I think I sent that tweet on Friday, as you mentioned, we had the week of all weeks. I cannot remember a week quite like this where fringe bubble teams had just ginormous wins almost every single day. So it started with Monday, Virginia won at Duke. Then Tuesday, Santa Clara beats St. Mary's. Wednesdays, SMU beats Houston. Thursday, Michigan blows out Purdue. And then Saturday, we had 2 enormous road wins. And we talked about this on the show the first 3 weeks of its inception, how important road wins are. Memphis wins at Houston, who at the time was number 2 in the net, and Rutgers wins at Wisconsin to give themselves 6 wins against the field. I mean, I've never seen a week where so many teams that weren't in the field to start the week got landmark wins over quote unquote protected seeds. And that's really where it all came from, is just blown away by what kind of week we saw.
Yeah, we're going to talk Memphis and Rutgers quite a bit coming up. So don't worry, folks. Those 2 teams will get their due. Jonathon, do you feel the same way? You feel like this has actually been a strong bubble season so far?
I think it's strengthening. I certainly was probably middle of January, this is the worst bubble ever. I was along those sentiments.
Fatalistic. Yep.
Yeah. It was not good to kind of start, but I think it's strengthening. I think there's more teams kind of, showing themselves to be more deserving of being in the NCAA tournament, being a potential at-large team, especially helped this past week. I still think it's going to fluctuate. I think it's going to be at the very end, an average bubble. I think there's going to be some teams that ultimately play themselves out of mention and get themselves out of the bubble picture. But I think it's certainly at the very least a mediocre bubble, and maybe it's a strong bubble, as Rocco said.
Yep, they always do. So a couple teams always make their case very clear one way or the other, sometimes on that negative side, and they play themselves out, as you said. But all right, let's get into the nitty-gritty, the essentials here, the real the meat of a bracketology show. And that is, of course, the 1 seeds in the bubble. And we're going to start with the 1 seeds because everybody wants to know who's at the top of each region, who has earned that precious number 1 seed. Only 1 team has ever lost there. So, of course, it is very important. Jonathon, let's go to you first. I want to hear who you have as your 4 1 seeds, hopefully in order, and then we'll see if Rocco agrees. So what do you got for us?
In order, I've got Auburn remaining my number 1 overall seed. I know they just lost to Arkansas, but they still have the best overall resume. Gonzaga is my number 2 overall seed. Arizona quickly emerging. They actually moved up into being my 4th number 1 seed when I did a full rescrub. And then I rounded out with Kansas. I think there's some close contention for there, but those are my 4 number 1 seeds.
Okay. Rocco, where do you land? Do you have those same 4?
I do not.
Ooh.
So I'm going to kick it. I've made the switch starting last Friday morning to make Gonzaga the number 1 overall seed. I think we're in this new era of net. We talked about that a little bit on previous shows, where I think the wow factor of all the metrics, where Gonzaga just dominates basically the net itself, on top of the KenPoms, the Sagarins, basically every advanced metric system. Gonzaga can game that a little bit by winning 30 to 50 point games in the WCC, but they're backing that up. I mean, St. Mary's is a solid team. They got them by nearly 20 over the weekend, and they'll play them again. And I just see this heading in a direction where it's going to be really hard to knock Gonzaga off the top. Now, Auburn, of course, just better body of work, number 1 in resume, well-deserved there. I'm really impressed with their 13 wins against the top 2 quads, 20 wins against the top 3. Nobody's close to that. So it's more like a 1A, 1B in that comparison. But away from home, Auburn has the Alabama win. They have a neutral over Loyola Chicago. Those are the only 2 against the field away from Auburn. They fell short of an opportunity at Arkansas, just barely. So anyway, that's the reason for giving Gonzaga the nod at this point. And then I do agree with Jonathon that Arizona is the 3rd number 1 seed. But as my 4th, a little bit of a surprise this morning after a deeper analysis, I went ahead and put Baylor as the 4th number 1, coming off another impressive performance over the weekend. The Baylor Bears and Kansas Jayhawks are neck and neck. They both have 8 wins over the projected field, or if I throw North Texas in that pile for Kansas, so we'll call it 8-8. They're very even almost across all comparisons. A little bit better road record for the Bears. They've got 6 wins against the top 2 on the road, whereas Kansas just has 5. And then you break the tie with some of these predictive metrics. Baylor's really close to about a 4 average, whereas Kansas is closer to an 8 average. And I think that's an easy way to break that tie and give it to Baylor.
You know who's a 3 average in those predictive metrics?
Yes,
that would be Kentucky. That'd be Big Blue Nation. So, Jonathon, why are they not cracking that 1 line? I mean, I know obviously Baylor's a consideration there, Kansas, whatever the Big 12 team of the day for you is, but Kentucky certainly making a case with the way they played. Is it just a matter of the resume is not strong enough, or what do you see that keeps Big Blue off that 1 line?
Yeah, I think it's clearly just the resume. From a talent perspective, from an eye test perspective, from a team who I think is playing the best basketball right now, I think Kentucky has that case. And I would pick, if you're asking me to pick a national champion, I would probably start that list with the Kentucky Wildcats. But
I believe you did start a list with Kentucky, right?
I did start a list.
There it is.
So, yeah, but in terms of resume, they've got 5 quadrant 1 wins. Don't really have that, what I would call signature win. They have a lot of really good wins, but I guess they won at Kansas, so that's kind of a signature win. But just kind of not enough wins. They're going to have opportunities upcoming to eventually get on the 1 line. And I do think you're asking me who's going to end up being on the 1 line. I think Kentucky's going to eventually, end of the season, get there. They just don't have the resume yet to be number 1 seed just yet. But certainly the bracket is ever changing. This Kentucky team looks very good. So I wouldn't be surprised if we end up in a situation where they get that number 1 seed.
All right, Rocco, I want you to speak to 2 things there that he mentioned. First is the head-to-head matchup with Kansas. Obviously, you don't have Kansas on the 1 line, so that's not quite the tiebreaker for you. But how much does that game matter when it comes down to it, to the selection committee? And then also, I like what Jonathon said about he thinks Kentucky will be the one that gets there, but it's just not quite there yet. Do you agree with that statement? So those 2 things, that's what I'm curious about.
Yeah, I would say, the committee will tell you, and you'll hear them say this on Saturday when you turn on CBS before the Kentucky game against Alabama. They'll say, every game is just as important as the rest of your schedule. You're telling a story throughout your season of what you're about. So, of course, the highlight of Kentucky season to this point is clobbering Kansas at Fog Allen Fieldhouse. There's no question about that. And it's a beautiful win. It's a stronger win than Kansas has themselves. However, the body of work is really what it comes down to, as well as, this new era of predictive metrics where that does start to factor in. And Kentucky, when compared to both Baylor and Kansas, just a tad short. They're barely over 500 in quad 1 games. They've had 9 chances. They've won 5 of 9. The other two teams have won 8 of 11 and 9 of 12. I mean, that's a much higher percentage in huge games. They're also much shorter in the top 2 quadrants, top 3 quadrants, and they don't have as impressive as a road resume yet in terms of overall record. Again, they have the marquee shiny object victory. And I do think if Kentucky can go to Tennessee tomorrow and win, there's a really good chance they're going to jump both these teams for me. So they're right there. And I wake up every morning thinking that's the morning they're going to get up there. They're just not there yet. And then your second question, yes, I generally agree with what Jonathon's saying. This team has really just been on fire for weeks now. And, for all intents and purposes, it looks like they're cruising right towards the top of that one board. And then they'll get another crack at Auburn if it all plays out in the SEC tournament. And that could get them maybe even up to close to number 1 overall if they just keep winning.
Yep. I think that's the key point. Those lack of or not as many Q1 wins, the winning percentage against Q1, that's important, but it's something that can be improved upon. And Kentucky is likely going to do that down the stretch. They're going to have, I would say they more or less control their destiny for a 1 seed. If they just keep winning, they're going to get one. Baylor and Kansas are likely going to take a couple of their losses in that difficult Big 12. So Kentucky, it's up to you. Go out and get it. It's going to be on the platter there for you.
And Jim, just a quick note on that. Their next 4 games are against teams in the top 6 seeds. They got Tennessee, Bama this week. Next week's LSU, Arkansas. You guys Kentucky go 4-0. They're probably, in the debate for number 1 overall.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's even 3-1 is likely a strong argument for 1 seed there. Okay, let's go to bubble. Let's move into the land of the bubble. Let's talk about last 4 teams in, next 4 out. And then I'm probably going to pry a little deeper and see what other teams you had right around that cut line. And Rocco, I know this is probably a difficult one because you mentioned there were teams you had to leave out that you felt were worthy and potential candidates to be in the field. So let's start with the teams that actually did make it for you. The last 4 in. Let's give the people your last 4 in and talk about the teams that are there.
Yeah. So today, the last 4 in, it comes out with we came out of the exercise with Creighton, North Carolina, Memphis getting into the field for the first time since the turn of the new year, and Oregon hanging on to the very last spot. I do have SMU as a penciled in AAC champion, as they are tied for first with Houston and winning the tiebreaker right now with that win in between Memphis and Oregon. So if anybody wants to look at it like that, but those are my last 4 in. And, the reasons for selection, I think, I guess I'll just start with the bottom team there, Oregon. They're right next to on my board, Michigan and Oklahoma, my first 2 out. We'll get to them later, but I just think those road wins, even though there were barely no fans, there were no fans at UCLA, barely no fans at USC during that strange 10-day period where they couldn't have any fans. Doesn't look any different on the team sheet. And I know the loss at home to Cal is ugly. The loss at home to Colorado is ugly. The loss at home to Arizona State is ugly. But this is kind of like, Jim, I think you said it on Friday. You don't know what to do with them. Throw them in Dayton and give them a chance. And I think that's where Oregon's at.
Yeah, the high ceiling, high floor kinds of teams.
Yeah.
All right, Jonathon, what about you? Where did you land last 4 in? We'll see if you had any overlap with Rocco and talk about the differences. So what do you got?
Yeah, I had a couple of those teams where I was just like, who knows where they are, team-wise, but I'm just going to kind of throw them in Dayton. A couple of them, of course, North Carolina. This is a team, no quadrant 1 wins, which that is not great. They still got a couple quadrant 2 wins here and there, but yeah, I mean, in terms of this team, they haven't done much, but they also have, some really good overall metrics, just in, net, even like strength of record, which is kind of weird. You're like, this is all about resume. They rank 26 in strength of record. So it's kind of hard to keep a team that is top 30 in that metric. It's something I think I value out of the NCAA tournament, even though they don't have that quadrant 1 win. BYU is in for now. This is a team I think that is going to eventually play its way out. They're barely beating kind of the bottom teams in the WCC, but I think they eventually play themselves out. But right now they're still in. Michigan, another team that is just kind of barely in for now. I don't like the record, 13-10 record. I'm kind of keeping them just in because of some of the predictive metrics. But again, this is going to be a situation if they finish the season strong and get some quality wins, they're going to end up being in the NCAA tournament, but they, right now, I think putting them in Dayton seems like a fair place. And then the Creighton Blue Jays are kind of my last team in, not really rating well in the net, but they still got a couple, really high quality wins. So I have them in Dayton for now.
Yeah, like the North Carolina is kind of the opposite. The team that has not lost any bad games, none outside of Q1, but they haven't proven the upside. So I would love to see them play somebody like Memphis that's got the big wins, but the bad losses, and really have those two teams just decide which one belongs. Okay, let's before we start asking team specific questions, let's go to the first four out. Let's go right back to you, Jonathon. The first four that just missed the field, so they're outside of that picture. The just barely trailing Creighton and Michigan and BYU. Who do you have in that four?
Yeah, so one of the teams was ends up being Rocco's team that he has in. It is the Oregon Ducks. This is just kind of a team I couldn't quite get there. I think with 2 quadrant 3 losses, they would be easily included, but right now they're just on the wrong side. Rutgers is another team that I think is going to eventually play their way in, but right now I can't bother taking a team that ranks 81st in that. I think if they get to top 75, which I think they will get to, they're going to find themselves being inside the field, but they're on the outside looking in for now. Kansas State, another team that I have just out the outside. It's a team I think with a pretty good overall resume, but that 13-11 record, I can't select that team right now. If they flip one of those games, they're probably in the field. They're probably not even in Dayton, but that's what their record is. And then SMU, I know they have the big win against Houston, but not a whole lot there. A couple of bad losses, so they remain on the first four out. But again, like the bubble this week, who knows what could happen? They could end up being right in the NCAA tournament. A few things go the other way. So those are my first four out.
Yeah, and a lot of these teams are playing like 3 games in a week these days because of some of the COVID reschedules. So the movement is rapid on the bubble, especially. All right, Rocco, what about you? Do you have similar 4 teams in the first 4 out, or what did you settle on?
Yeah, fairly similar. Michigan, I think, Jonathon, you had them barely in. So basically, if we just swapped Michigan and Oregon, we're right there, and that's where right where my cut line was drawn. So Michigan ends up on the wrong side today. Had them in on Friday, took a loss over the weekend, and now they're just barely out. One thing about Michigan is they have losing records in all the quadrants now. So they're 9-10 against the top 3. That's something that just kind of tips the scales for me. Unless you have something incredible. A home win over Purdue is close to incredible, but I'd love to see a road win like that. Their best road win is just Indiana. So they're on the outside for me. And then my next 3, Jim, Oklahoma, Belmont, and Rutgers. Belmont is a really interesting case. We've been talking about them for weeks. They actually got some brutal news over the last week because their best 2 wins are Iona and St. Louis, 2 teams that took brutal losses over the weekend, and that really hurt the Bruins from a shiny resume standpoint. Now we're looking at a Bruins team with no wins against the field. SLU is their best win still. It is a nice road win. The metrics are still in a position where we're 47th overall in the net, and then 46th overall in strength of record. So a team like Belmont in a conference, in a low major conference, you got to look at these metrics a little closer because there's no really other areas to compare them to, like a Michigan or even a San Diego State. So, I just think Belmont's going to be one of those teams. If they're still in this position, they're going to get extra attention, especially when you have a chairman from the Southland Conference this year. Belmont's in there in my first 4 out still.
I'm intrigued by Oklahoma there, Rocco. Jonathon, is that a team that you have ahead of your last 4 in, or where do you have Oklahoma?
Yeah, I have them currently ahead of the last 4 in. They're actually they're actually like the 5th to last team in. So they're right there. But yeah, I look at their resume, that the 3-1 or 3-8 quadrant 1 record doesn't look great, but they have the wins. They've got a signature win. I would classify it against Texas Tech. So they have the wins to be there, a good net ranking. Again, it's kind of like a, issue of, do you take a team that is 14-11 overall? Right now, I'd say yes, but one man's treasures, another man's trash, as they would say. So some people could look at Oklahoma and see, oh, right, they're not in the NCAA tournament. So that's kind of where I have them, though.
Yep, and you have Kansas State lurking. So the Big 12 definitely has some intriguing candidates right around that bubble. All right, guys, let's talk a couple specific teams that are getting a lot of attention, specifically because their last week, as Rocco kind of recaps, some teams that were maybe on the fringe got huge wins to put themselves in the picture. We got to start with Memphis. A team that maybe we thought was dead and buried. We thought the Penny Hardaway press conference explosions potentially was enough to really write them off. I remember the CBS Sports podcast was like, we're not going to talk about them the rest of the year. They're irrelevant. But here they are. They're nice and relevant. They won at Houston. Rocco, you had them just barely in, I believe.
Yes.
What is it about Memphis? Is it that big win outweighing some of the losses, or you feel like they're kind of surging up towards the safe space at least?
They're far from safe, Jim. I think I think this is an exercise it's a comparison of a cluster of teams at all times, and when I'm comparing Memphis to the teams right above them and below them. So Creighton, North Carolina, Oregon, Michigan, Oklahoma, Belmont, etc. And I just think that road win at Houston is just huge because I get that I said earlier about another team that you're always telling your season story with each game. But when you get to the bubble, it's really hard to get a win that good out of a bubble team. And everything else starts to balance out. You also look a little closer, Jim, and you see that Memphis has 4 quad 1 wins. And besides Rutgers, that's probably the best on the bubble. You could say Kansas State has 5, which they do, but they're also 5-9. This Memphis Tigers group, they're 4-6. So yeah, they've had their lumps against East Carolina and Tulsa. But when it's time, when the lights come on, they're 4 for 6. I mean, they're batting 667 if this is baseball. And so I think that's why some of these pieces of criteria have been baked into the NCAA selection process for decades, is because they want to find squads that are going to show up at tournament time, that have the high upside. And if your matchup of Memphis and Carolina were to happen, that's a networking dream. True TV would have a blast with that.
Yes, they would.
So I just think this is where they fell for me, and it was all natural. And they're 44 in net. Their net ranking went up 27 spots in a week. So things drastically changed for this Tigers team. And now the heat is on from here on out.
Yeah, this is another team too, where Jonathon, if you wanted to, you could really look at it and say, when they've got their full or close to full contingent of players available, they're a lot better. When DeAndre Williams is healthy, when Jalen Duren is healthy, they're a better team. And they proved it with that win at Houston. So is that something you consider with them? I know they're in your field as well. How are you looking at Houston right now?
Yeah, I mean,
Memphis. Sorry.
Yeah. I mean, I like the trend of Memphis a little bit better than the trend of Houston, but yeah, I mean, this Memphis team, I think that signature win is certainly something that not a lot of bubble teams have. I guess Oregon has a signature win at UCLA, so I mean, I had them out, so you could make an argument. I'm being somewhat hypocritical here, but I mean, with this Memphis team, I think that Rocco mentioned it, 4-2 in quadrant 1, having that big win. I know they have a couple of bad losses at East Carolina, at Georgia. That's as bad as it gets out there, but they still have, I think, the good record. They also beat Alabama earlier in the season. That's a win that's aging quite well. It'll be interesting to see where Wichita State ends up on the net, because that's another game where they look good in that game too, and they won that game handily. That's currently classifying as a quadrant 1 game, but if Wichita State falls off, maybe they fall to just 3-2. We'll see where they kind of go from here. I think this game against SMU is going to be absolutely huge. I think this could be like a play your way in type of game. So we'll see where they go there. But right now, I think this Memphis team, I have them in. You could have them out, but I like this Tigers resume overall better than other bubble teams.
Yeah, it's been strong, and it's getting stronger. Like Penny said, wait till I have my full contingent of players, and to his credit, they have actually started to prove that, and it's borne out over the last few games. I don't know if any team exemplifies the game of teams moving in between quadrants as well as North Carolina, because of Michigan giving them a Q1 win for a couple days and then dropping right back out of the Q1 category. So they're hoping they stay up there. But another Big Ten team that I think we need to discuss is Rutgers. I think, Rocco, correct me if I'm wrong, it was like, okay, they've got some great home wins, whatever, but then they go to Wisconsin and they get that road win that you're talking about. And now it's a real consideration. So yes. What do they need to do to solidify themselves or to get over the hump and get into the field?
I mean, they got to keep winning, of course. I think, with Rutgers, Jonathon mentioned it briefly earlier, they're 81st in net still. So performance is starting to improve. I think they were in the hundreds just a week or two ago. So they've already been jumping up with these performances. If they keep playing at this level, that should naturally take care of itself. I think the crazy thing for Rutgers is they're in this ridiculous stretch right now where they're playing Illinois and Purdue this week after coming off those two big wins last week over Ohio State and Wisconsin. So the hits keep coming, but they're stepping up to the plate. They beat Michigan State the game before that even. So these are the games that will define their season. They also have a troubling, road record in general, both away, neutral, 3-7. That does not measure out well against pretty much anybody else in the bubble. So the remaining road games, Purdue isn't probably going to help that record. If they win that game, we're not having this conversation. And then you have the road Michigan game coming a week from Wednesday. That's already shaping up to be a bubble burster. And then a road Indiana game too. So the remaining three road games are not good for their record per se, but if they get any of them, the profile is going to improve anyway. So it could make up for that. So that's why I think the Scarlet Knights fall. The other concern is they're 298th in non-conference strength. So I do think if they get selected, you probably got to the committee is probably going to consider moving them up the board and out of the first four, just historically thinking about that.
Okay. Yeah, Jonathon, I think that's something Rocco's has been consistent with or mentioned that non-conference strength of schedule is usually a big differentiator that you have to overcome a bad one more so than you even get like a boost from a great one. You've got to schedule well. That's key. So it just back to you, Jonathon, on Rutgers real quick. Do you feel similarly? It's just, they're just maybe a win or two away, particularly on the road. They obviously have that Lafayette home loss and some of their other early season foibles weighing them down. Is that where you stand with them as well?
Right now, I see their path to the NCAA tournament is two things. One, I think if they go 3-3 down the stretch, they're going to have the necessary wins that take that, and then the other thing too is they'll obviously, by winning these games, they'll move up from 81st in the net to maybe 67th in the net. And if you're 67th in the net with 6 or 7 quadrant 1 wins, a few more quadrant 2 wins, they're not going to take any more bad losses the rest of the way. That's going to be a team that gets into the NCAA tournament. So I think the path to them, I've kind of looked at it like finish 3-3 in this season, and they're going to be in the NCAA tournament. They go 2-4, you're probably staring down maybe not making the NCAA tournament. But I think if they get 3 wins in this upcoming brutal stretch of games that they have upcoming, and that would include getting like some massive either big road win or taking care of business at home and beating an Illinois team that looks very good, and that's going to be a quadrant 1A game. I think if they go 3-3 in their upcoming stretch, they're going to make the NCAA tournament.
It's on the ball's in your court, Rutgers. We'll put it that way. You've got the chances, and that's the benefit of a lot of these power conference teams is they have the chances to get up into that tournament field. Yeah. Let's go west. Let's go west, Jonathon. I'm going to ask you about Oregon, a team that you guys basically had last in, first out. Like they are basically the definition of the cut line right now, which obviously makes them vulnerable to bid stealers, yada, yada, yada. But a lot's going to change before Selection Sunday. So where are we at with Oregon? Obviously, they took that bad loss to Cal this weekend. How badly did that hurt them?
I think it notched them down a couple seeds. I think that I had them like last 4 buys, as you would kind of classify it. So they were on the bubble, but on the right side. Takes them obviously now to first 4 out for me. But this is still an Oregon team. I think unlike a lot of Pac-12 teams, has potential to really help their resume. They're going to have games against Arizona, USC, and UCLA. those are the three teams we've been talking about all season long, being the teams that if you win these games, you're going to really help your resume. And so if they're able to, let's say, finish, I think talking on the podcast last night, we kind of said 5-2 down the stretch probably gets them in. If they go 5-2 down the stretch, get another additional win against either USC, UCLA, or Arizona, that's going to be enough for them. So I think the ball is back in their court. They need to obviously win those games and potentially add another quadrant one win. But if they're able to do that, I think this Oregon team is going to be on the right side of the bubble once again come Selection Sunday.
I like that 5-2 mark, because even if they take a bad loss as part of the 2 losses, that means they get an extra big win. So there's going to be at least 2 big wins in there to weigh it out. Rocco, I know we talked about it a little bit earlier, but do you have any parting thoughts on the Ducks or anything else you want to comment on?
Well, free plug. I'll be in Tucson this weekend covering the game. So it should be hopefully a close game. Arizona has a tendency to blow people out. Jim, I'll have to get some Tucson tips from you. But anyway, I'll stay out of the school library.
That's highly recommended.
Okay, perfect. I think I largely agree with Jonathan. I don't like to usually put records on teams for being scheduled to say this will do it, this won't do it, because I think I'm probably one of the few people that you'll hear this from. I'm not a big fan of blind resumes. I think the exact team you play matters. That's why I go through this tedious process of figuring out who's a tournament caliber win and who's not. It's probably why North Carolina, with their Michigan example, going back and forth from Q1 to Q2 doesn't really make a difference to me. I'm looking at that as a win against the field either way. Hopefully a lot of committee members do that. I've kind of stolen that from old committee members. But for Oregon in general, I think a couple extremes that haven't been mentioned. They're 73rd now, strength of record wise. That's pretty troubling. And 62nd in the net itself. Again, 5-2 down the stretch. Jonathan, this works out pretty well. Jim, great response to that as well. I think that will probably solve a lot of their problems.
All right. Appreciate that. Yeah. Great response that I had.
It was.
Okay. One other team I want to talk about, and maybe I should have done this right after Rutgers, but it is Wisconsin, because this is a team that has definitely, honestly, it's kind of the same conversation as you have around Providence, of the gap between quality and resume metrics for them. And Wisconsin now just took a Q3 loss. They lost at home to Rutgers. It might not remain a Q3 loss, but as of now it is. So Jonathan, real quick, does that cut down how strong their resume metrics are compared to their quality metrics? Or do you still kind of just take those numbers on their own? Don't worry about that one extra loss that they added. How do you think about that for a team with such a wide gap between their metrics?
Yeah, I think it takes them down, like resume wise, just a little bit. They coming into this weekend were my number 9 overall team. So, the wins they have are still really impressive wins. They still have, I think it's 8 quadrant 1 wins. You have 8 quadrant 1 wins. That is doing heavily work. And I think some of their wins are even better than some of the wins Providence has at this point, which helps them. Obviously, bad loss at home to Rutgers. I don't think that's going to be as bad of a loss come Selection Sunday, but obviously we're just kind of looking at the resumes right now. It could, very well in a week from now, it'll be, a quadrant 2 loss to a potential tournament team if Rutgers takes care of business. So we'll wait and see on where that Rutgers loss takes them from now. But yeah, they're still outside of that loss, only one sub Q1 loss. The rest of their losses are in quadrant 1. This Wisconsin team I still have as a 3 seed. I could see them being, when that bracket reveal is done later this week, being a 3, being a 4. We'll kind of wait and see on that. But yeah, this Wisconsin team, the resume is still there for them to be a high seed team.
Yeah, Rocco, is that the high seed team that some of the lower seeded teams want to see, maybe because of those predictive metrics?
Well, if you see a team lose at home to a Rutgers team that was fringe NIT going into the week, you're probably a little more confident than playing like Villanova. But, Wisconsin, I generally agree with Jonathan once again. Jonathan, you do excellent work. I think, this is a team that still has 8 wins against the field, Jim. It's also a team that has road wins at Purdue and Michigan State. And I had Michigan State winning that battle for the 16th spot. I think that's a really interesting battle right now between them and Houston and Alabama and others. But in general, even if you have Michigan State a 5 seed, Purdue, of course, a 2 seed with the potential to be a 1 again, and you have a neutral court win over Houston and a neutral court win over St. Mary's. I mean, this is just it's like the very first thing I look at before I fill out the rest of the sheet, and it's like, man, how can I let other teams pass them just because they lost one home game? They did come down a couple spots on the board, but they stayed at 3 seed. So I'm pretty much there.
All right. Last one I want to ask, kind of, it's not quite team specific, so this is going to be a surprise for you guys. You don't know this one's coming, but it's tangentially related to one I sort of told you to prepare for. I want to talk ACC real quick because we know Duke's number 1. But after that, who do you have? How do you order the remaining ACC teams? Because Miami just won at Wake Forest. We got Notre Dame has been really surging lately. They got another road win at Clemson. North Carolina's just kind of chugging along. I know they were right in the bubble for both of you guys last 4 in. So Jonathon, I'll go to you. How do you rank the ACC after Duke?
I have no idea, to be honest. I have all these teams somewhere between like the last 10 teams in and last 4 in. So right now I have 5 ACC teams, but it's like neck and neck between these teams. I think right now, like, I think Notre Dame's kind of like one of these teams sort of emerging as being like a little bit more comfy in. I have them, avoiding Dayton altogether. I have Wake Forest and Miami also avoiding Dayton altogether. So I think those teams are maybe the most safe of anyone. We'll kind of wait and see where the resumes take them from there, which ones actually, continue to win, which ones remain inconsistent. But yeah, I think Wake Forest is another kind of team I think is somewhat, closer to being safe than not safe, just kind of with their overall record. I think you could potentially hold, if you wanted to take Miami out of the NCAA tournament, hold their net against them. I think you could. I think a counter argument is they're 4-1 in quadrant 1 games and have a road win at Duke and a road win at Wake Forest. So these teams are all really close together. And then obviously North Carolina rounding out those 4. I think those 4 are really close together. I think, we're looking at a situation where, maybe all 4 of those teams the rest of the season take care of business in the games they're supposed to. And we see a 5-bid ACC, but we could also see a situation where, a couple of these teams take, losses to Boston College and Louisville and end up being on the wrong side of the bubble. So none of these teams seem safe, but that's kind of the order I have them in for now.
Rocco, what about you? You got any difference in order there or difference in opinion? What do you think?
I got 2 different orders, Jim, because I got one in order of safety. So in order of safety, I would go Miami, Notre Dame, then Wake because of their non-conference strength of schedule. And then Carolina, of course, 4th in that foursome. If we go in order of the board right now, though, it's Miami, Wake, then Notre Dame, and North Carolina, 4th, of course. I think we also have to mention Virginia. Virginia is a very intriguing team. They got wins at Duke and a neutral court blowout over a Providence team that just keeps going up and up and up. And the problem right now is they've got 4 losses, 2B or lower. So quad 2B or lower. That's a list that includes JMU, Navy, Clemson, and NC State. And that's suffocating their strength of resume at a 66 and an overall net at 77. So it just seems a little unbalanced. Virginia also has a home win over Miami. So I think you got to keep your eye on the Cavs. They got 2 road games coming up, one tonight against Virginia Tech and another one, I think is at Miami this Sunday. So this is a team that can really make a move here and obviously playing their best basketball of the year right now. At least it seems that way. So those are the ones I'm watching the closest.
I like that you mentioned that game tonight, the Virginia game, because someone in the chat, where did it go? It was in there. Oh, Lester Lee asked, does the loser of that game, are they just eliminated from from contention? Jonathon, do you think that it's that much of a like do or die game, or is there still some leeway for either one of those teams, Virginia or Virginia Tech?
I don't know if it's like a do or die game, but I think it's as close to a must win I think it's more must win for Virginia if they're able to kind of build themselves a resume. They need this win because they would qualify as another quadrant 1 win. They need quality wins to kind of offset. So this would be a good win. I guess Virginia Tech could also use it to add another quadrant two win to the resume. They need to obviously get some quadrant 1 wins in here sometime to, potentially, chase down a tournament bid. But I think it's a game both teams really need to win. I think the loser is not officially eliminated, but getting pretty close to getting eliminated.
What do you think, Rocco?
Yeah, I think Virginia Tech's on life support. So I think every one of their games going on out is a must win. They also don't have the luxury of a tough schedule left. Their next 2 games are Virginia tonight, Carolina on Saturday, and then a road game at Miami the week after. So those are 3 decent games, but they don't have a Duke left. Of course, there's not much else out there. They don't have a Notre Dame game. You look at Virginia's schedule, they get another Duke game. They get a road game, like I mentioned, on Sunday at Miami. And they're also much closer to the cut line, in my opinion. I think I have them 6th out. So they're just 1 or 2 big wins away from being in the field. Whereas Virginia Tech, like Jonathon mentioned, really have nothing to work with right now in terms of wins. They just have these gaudy metrics because they blew out teams like St. Bonaventure. But it's really not doing them much justice in terms of being selected here at the final hour.
Yeah, the gap between their quality and resume metrics is insane. I'm looking at the average for Virginia Tech's resume metrics, 82, which is nowhere close to the field. But then their quality metrics is 27. So if they actually were to get in, they might get seeded fairly competitively, but it's a long journey to get up there.
They probably need to play Duke in the ACC tournament too.
Yeah, that would certainly help. All right, let's close out quick, guys. Let's look ahead to this week. Some of the games that you're looking at, in addition to Virginia Tech, obviously a huge one. Any others that you're looking ahead to, whether it's tonight or anytime this week? Jonathon, I'll go to you first. Any big games that you're really keeping your eye on in particular?
I kind of have my eye on Iowa State's going on the road to take on TCU. I think this is a really big game for both these teams upcoming, because both of them are kind of like starting to skid, and which team can kind of like get that, win to be like, all right, we're back on track to make the NCAA tournament. Both those teams are currently in the field right now, but if either team loses that game, it could be a situation where they start to snowball down the stretch in the Big 12 and find themselves potentially on the bubble sooner rather than later. I don't think it's going to get much publicity, but that's kind of a game I'm looking forward to see which team can kind of solidify themselves as a clear NCAA tournament team.
Yeah, Iowa State's going to be a fun test down the road if they finish with one of 6-12 in the Big 12 or something. Really find out what kind of stomach the committee has. Yeah, I believe so too. But it's going to be fun to see the committee have to answer the questions on it. And
yeah,
I'm sure we'll hear Joel Lenardi on ESPN say a million times that conference record does not matter. Hopefully it'll get through people's heads. Rocco, what about you? Any other big games you want to mention, get called out here as we head into the week?
Absolutely. So the old adage, Jim, for power conference teams fighting for a tournament bid, your resume, and you're on the bubble in this case, your resume doesn't have a good road win in the first, quadrant and a half, let's just say 2A. Your season and your chances haven't really started. And one of those teams that's just been lurking around but don't have that is the Mississippi State Bulldogs. And Mississippi State's already got a home win over Alabama. They're going to now go to Coleman Wednesday night, a chance to sweep the Tide and really kickstart their resume finally. I mean, better late than never if you're Mississippi State. I think that could really start to shift not only their resume, but what goes on in that locker room and their confidence level. Mississippi State in recent weeks has had a couple big road opportunities and fallen short each time. They're running out of chances. They really got to go get that done on Wednesday, and that's a game I'm curious to see how they respond to this scenario.
Love it, man. There's plenty of games to look forward to. We got a full week of it. And of course, we will be back with another episode of Fielding the 68 on Friday. We'll wrap it up now. Thank you, Jonathon. Thank you, Rocco, for your time. It's great to have you guys on. I actually don't know who's back with us on Friday. Are either of you?
We don't know either.
We don't. Oh, it's a mystery. We're going to find out.
It's a mystery show. Yes.
Yep. But then, of course, we will hit you guys with it on Friday. It'll be the same time, 6 p.m. Eastern, right before the games tip off. get you a little update. We'll have our top 16 before the committee's top 16 on Saturday. And of course, after this show wraps up, we'll release the Field of 68 consensus seed list from our 4 bracketologists, giving you the idea of what all these 4 great minds put together look like. No bias in there. There's going to be a lot of, that's how you sort through any outliers, is having that, the consensus put together. But of course, thank you again to Jonathon and Rocco. Thank you to Dagan Hughes behind the scenes, our producer. Thank you to Bet Rivers for sponsoring the show. And thank you to Field of 68 for the opportunity to be on here. And thank you everybody for tuning in. Please enjoy your night of basketball, and we'll see you